Welcome to the Virgo Potens YouTube channel. If you enjoy this video, then check out the Virgo Potens website at virgopotens.org. Please consider supporting this work by becoming a patron of Virgo Potens on Patreon and by buying my ebooks available on Apple Books. Lastly, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this Virgo Potens YouTube channel. Thank you, and may the Virgin Most Powerful guide and protect you. The Loosening of the Devil by St. Augustine, and narrated by Tony Capobianco. St. Augustine explains the book of the Apocalypse, which teaches that Satan will be loosed at the end of the world and that the Catholic Church will not cease to exist or be deceived by the devil. The following text comes from Book 20, Chapter 8 of The City of God by St. Augustine. The City of God is in the public domain. Chapter 8 of the Binding and Loosening of the Devil. After that, says John, he must be loosed a little season. If the binding and shutting up of the devil means his being made unable to seduce the church, must his loosing be the recovery of this ability? By no means. For the church predestined and elected before the foundation of the world, the church of which it is said, quote, "The Lord knoweth them that are his," end quote, shall never be seduced by him. And yet there shall be a church in this world, even when the devil shall be loosed, as there has been since the beginning, and shall be always, the places of the dying being filled by new believers. For a little after, John says that the devil, being loosed, shall draw the nations whom he has seduced in the whole world to make war against the church, and that the number of these enemies shall be as the sand of the sea. Quote, "And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. And fire came down from God out of heaven, and devoured them. And the devil, who seduced them, was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night for ever and ever." End quote. This relates to the Last Judgment, but I have thought fit to mention it now, lest anyone might suppose that in the short time during which the devil shall be loose, there shall be no church upon earth, whether because the devil finds no church or destroys it by manifold persecutions. The devil, then, is not bound during the whole time which this book embraces, that is, from the first coming of Christ to the end of the world, when he shall come the second time. Not bound in this sense, that during this interval, which goes by the name of 1,000 years, he shall not seduce the church, for not even when loosed shall he seduce it. For certainly, if his being bound means that he is not able or not permitted to seduce the church, what can the loosing of him mean but his being able or permitted to do so? But God forbid that such should be the case. But the binding of the devil is his being prevented from the exercise of his whole power to seduce men, either by violently forcing or fraudulently deceiving them into taking part with him. If he were, during so long a period, permitted to assail the weakness of men, very many persons, such as God would not wish to expose to such temptation, would have their faith overthrown, or would be prevented from believing. And that this might not happen, he is bound. But when the short time comes, he shall be loosed. For he shall rage with the whole force of himself and his angels for 3 years and 6 months. And those with whom he makes war shall have power to withstand all his violence and stratagems. And if he were never loosed, his malicious power would be less patent, and less proof would be given of the steadfast fortitude of the holy city. It would, in short, be less manifest what good use the Almighty makes of his great evil. For the Almighty does not absolutely seclude the saints from his temptation, but shelters only their inner man, where faith resides, that by outward temptation they may grow in grace. And he binds him, that he may not, in the free and eager exercise of his malice, hinder or destroy the faith of those countless weak persons, already believing or yet to believe, from whom the church must be increased and completed. And he will, in the end, loose him, that the city of God may see how mighty an adversary it has conquered, to the great glory of its Redeemer, Helper, Deliverer. And what are we in comparison with those believers and saints who shall then exist, seeing that they shall be tested by the loosing of an enemy with whom we make war at the greatest peril, even when he is bound? Although it is also certain that even in this intervening period there have been and are some soldiers of Christ so wise and strong that if they were to be alive in this mortal condition at the time of his loosing, they would both most wisely guard against and most patiently endure all his snares and assaults. Now the devil was thus bound, not only when the church began to be more and more widely extended among the nations beyond Judea, but is now and shall be bound till the end of the world, when he is to be loosed. Because even now men are, and doubtless to the end of the world shall be, converted to the faith from the unbelief in which he held them. And this strong one is bound in each instance in which he is spoiled of one of his goods. And the abyss in which he is shut up is not at an end when those die who were alive when first he was shut up in it. But these have been succeeded, and shall to the end of the world be succeeded, by others born after them with a like hate of the Christians, and in the depth of whose blind hearts he is continually shut up as in an abyss. But it is a question whether, during these 3 years and 6 months, when he shall be loose and raging with all his force, anyone who has not previously believed shall attach himself to the faith. For how, in that case, would the words hold good, quote, "Who entereth into the house of a strong one to spoil his goods, unless first he shall have bound the strong one," end quote. Consequently, this verse seems to compel us to believe that during that time, short as it is, no one will be added to the Christian community, but that the devil will make war with those who have previously become Christians, and that though some of these may be conquered and desert to the devil, these do not belong to the predestinated number of the sons of God. For it is not without reason that John, the same apostle as wrote this apocalypse, says in his epistle regarding certain persons, quote, "They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would no doubt have remained with us," end quote. "But what shall become of the little ones? For it is beyond all belief that in these days there shall not be found some Christian children born, but not yet baptized, and that there shall not also be some born during that very period. And if there be such, we cannot believe that their parents shall not find some way of bringing them to the laver of regeneration. But if this shall be the case, how shall these goods be snatched from the devil when he is loose? Since into his house no man enters to spoil his goods, unless he has first bound him. On the contrary, we are rather to believe that in these days there shall be no lack either of those who fall away from, or of those who attach themselves to the church. But there shall be such resoluteness, both in parents to seek baptism for their little ones, and in those who shall then first believe, that they shall conquer that strong one, even though unbound, that is, shall both vigilantly comprehend and patiently bear up against him, though employing such wiles and putting forth such force as he never before used, and thus they shall be snatched from him, even though unbound. And yet the verse of the gospel will not be untrue. Quote, "Who entereth into the house of the strong one to spoil his goods, unless he shall first have bound the strong one," end quote. For, in accordance with this true saying, that order is observed the strong one first bound, and then his goods spoiled. For the church is so increased by the weak and strong from all nations far and near, that by its most robust faith in things, divinely predicted and accomplished, it shall be able to spoil the goods of even the unbound devil. For as we must own that, quote, when iniquity abounds, the love of many waxes cold, end quote, and that those who have not been written in the book of life shall in large numbers yield to the severe and unprecedented persecutions and stratagems of the devil now loosed. So we cannot but think that not only those whom that time shall find sound in the faith, but also some who till then shall be without, shall become firm in the faith that they have hitherto rejected, and mighty to conquer the devil, even though unbound. God's grace aiding them to understand the Scriptures, in which, among other things, there is foretold that very end which they themselves see to be arriving. And if this shall be so, his binding is to be spoken of as preceding, that there might follow a spoiling of him both bound and loosed. For it is of this it is said, quote, who shall enter into the house of the strong one to spoil his goods, unless he first shall have bound the strong one, end quote.